Hi guys, thanks for watching The Gap in the Gain Part 2. This is going to be a longer video where I'm going to ramble a little bit about specific ways that I think we as parents can take the lessons from this book and implement them into our own lives and the lives of our kids. So the experience transformer exercise, which I talked about in the first video, is such a powerful tool. And so I want to give a couple examples of how I think this could be used in action. And just to remind you, this is what the experience transformer series of questions is all about. The first is to think about the experience and ask, what about this worked? The second is to think, what can I gain from this experience that will improve my future? And the third is, what can you learn about what you don't want from this experience? So narrowing the playing field, so to speak, or improving your focus and knowing what you know now because of this experience, how will you approach your future differently? So again, honing in on where you really want to go and what has this experience taught you about what you want to do differently. And then the final thing is, what about this experience are you grateful for? And I think in the moment, this can be a little bit difficult, especially if the experience was a very tough one. But with distance, you can go back and think about experiences that you've had and be thankful for them. And I think we can all do this. If we think about our lives and how we've ended up where we are. If I think back 10 years ago, I never would have guessed that I would be where I am, married to the man that I am, with the kids that I have. That was a wish that I had, but I didn't know who that was going to be with or if it was even going to happen. So we can think back about our past experiences and know all the things that have happened since then and reframe those experiences, even the negative ones, as things that we have to be grateful for because they led us to where we are now and to the life that we have now. And so we can't regret the past because everything that happened had to happen to bring us to the point that we're at. So let's think about a specific scenario that you might encounter or that an adult might encounter and how we can use this experience transformer to affect a positive change in our attitude about the event. Let's say you go for a job interview and it sounds really like a job you would love to have, exactly the kind of work you want to be doing. And you've heard that the company is a great place to work. And the advertised salary for this position would be a big bump up from your last job. So you're super excited. You get an interview. You're stoked. You think you aced the interview. And then the next day you get a call from the recruiter and they tell you, sorry, they decided to go someone else who has more training and certification in this field. What might you be thinking and feeling in this scenario? I'm going to guess most of us would pretty much instantly be in a gap thought process about this. We'd be thinking things like, why does this always happen to me? Why do I never get the job that I apply for? Or who did I think I was applying for that job, thinking that you're not qualified for such a high-paying job? Or you might be thinking self-destructive thoughts like, oh, they didn't like me. Maybe I said something wrong in the interview. Maybe they could tell I was too nervous or I seemed desperate. So let's go through this exercise. If we think about the experience and ask ourselves, what about this worked? And this, of course, is after we have a little bit of time to process and sulk and feel sorry for ourselves, because that's a necessary part of the healing process too. You can't deprive yourself of that. But once you're ready to think about it and take something positive from it, you might think, okay, well, I got a new outfit. I got there on time. I found the place where the interview was. I looked professional and reliable. And the recruiter gave me some feedback on some specific skills that I can update that will make me more competitive in the future. And so number two, what usefulness can I gain from this experience that will improve my future? Well, maybe you updated your CV before you applied. So now when you apply for future jobs, you're going to be ready. It's going to take you less time and effort. And maybe that specific certification that the recruiter told you about that the candidate who got the job had and you didn't is something that you did a Google search and found out that you can sign up for it and get that certification pretty quickly. And you're planning to do that now so that you'll be more competitive for these job applications in the future. Number three, what can you learn about what you don't want from this experience? Well, maybe although you were really stoked for this job, when you got there and started the interview process, you asked about the possibility of working from home, because that's something you would like to do, to have that flexibility sometimes. And it was a hard no from this company. They do not allow any employees to work from home. And maybe as you thought about that more, that's really something that gives you pause, that you really, really decided that that's something that's important to you. And in the future, you're going to focus on applying for positions that have work from home flexibility. So that leads to number 4, knowing what you know now. Because of this experience, how will you approach your future differently? We've already thought of a couple things, right? You're going to get that certification, update your CV, and now you have a higher standard. You're going to decide that you're only going to apply for jobs that allow you to work from home sometimes when you want to have more flexibility. And what about this experience are you grateful for? Well, maybe it helped you learn that no matter the pay, work from home flexibility is a non-negotiable factor for you. And so now you know that whatever your next job is, you're going to have that, and that's going to be an improvement. So you can know that you're heading in the right direction and you're winning, even though you didn't get this job. So I think that's an example of how you might put this into play in real life, but you're going to have to try it for yourself a few times. And once you do, you'll realize it's pretty easy to get better at it, even though at first it feels kind of impossible. And as you do get better at it, I think it's extremely valuable to start sharing that process and your thinking and the results with your kids, and include them even, and see if they can help you come up with additional ways to reframe a negative experience into a learning experience, which is just a step on the path to a goal. So something that you can actually celebrate. So let's give an example that you might encounter with a child. Let's say that your teenage daughter tries out for the cheerleading squad at her high school and she doesn't make the team. So I'm sure you can imagine what this might look like if you have a teenage daughter. You're going to pick her up from school. She might be in tears. She might be saying things like, I can't believe Megan got on the team and I didn't. So that's a negative comparison, right? She's in the gap. She might be saying things like, forget it, I'm never going to be a cheerleader. It was stupid of me to think I could get on the team anyway. I've never done that before. She might be saying things like, I'm not flexible enough or thin enough or pretty enough or popular enough to herself, even if she's not verbalizing those things out loud. So ways that you can help your child with this emotional transformer skill set is, first of all, I think often in this scenario, we might say to our kids, no, don't worry, honey, you're great. It's their loss, trying to build them up, which is kind and loving. But at the same time, it doesn't really help them reframe that experience, because if they're really feeling like they're not enough, it feels like false. It feels like a lie. It feels like you're kind of, lying to them. So let them be with their emotional state for a little while, not permanently. We don't want to encourage them to brood about this and sulk about this for days or weeks, but, tell them that you hear how disappointed they are and that, they really wanted to be on the cheer team this year. Maybe say something like, okay, I know you really wanted this, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to verbalize all your frustrations and negative feelings about not getting on the team to me. And I'm just going to listen. I'm here for you. But after those 5 minutes, I want you to do something with me. Okay. And if she protests, you can just remind her that I know it's hard to think about how this might ever be considered a positive experience for you in any way right now. But do you remember the other week when I applied for that job and I didn't get it, or whatever your example is? And you helped me think about what good I could take from the experience. So doing that exercise really helped me. And I think that it could really help you too. So let's work on it together. And after she vents, you can remind her that, this is a sucky situation. Like, it sucks, but we can't control what happens to us in life. There are going to be situations that stink, and there are going to be disappointing events, sad events, heartbreak. And we can control how we use these events by redefining what they mean to us. So if your child's on board, then you might want to ask them to think about these 5 steps. So you can see if she can kind of think about what worked well in this tryout. Was there any part of the tryout that she felt good about? Was there any part of the experience that was positive for her? What usefulness can she gain from the tryouts that will improve her in the future? Did she get any feedback? Did she see any people doing things that she didn't know or skills she needs to develop that she can now practice? What can she learn about what she doesn't want from this experience? Did she get the feeling after seeing the tryouts that cheer is something that she really, really does want? Or was it something where she really didn't click with the girls and she decided that she doesn't actually even want to do this? She wants to do a different sport. And knowing what she knows now because of this experience, how will she approach her future differently? So if she's still really disappointed and she still really wants to do cheer, maybe you guys can talk about how she can better prepare for the next tryouts, or what other kind of cheer team she might join so that next year she can get on the cheer team. And if she's decided that cheer really isn't for her, maybe there's another sport or another activity that she wants to do. And then she can explore, what about the experience can she be grateful for? Maybe, maybe there was a friend who was really compassionate with her when she didn't get on the team and showed her a lot of love and support. Or maybe she's thankful that the coach encouraged her to try out again next year, or offered her like an alternate kind of position on the team, or to be a manager on the team, or something like that. So there's probably something positive and something that she can be grateful for about the experience, and that will help her as well to be able to not dwell on it in a negative way, to be in the gain about it rather than the gap. So the power of this is that it really truly can be applied to any scenario. As a psychiatrist, obviously, when I meet a new patient, I listen to their story. And a lot of times the stories that people tell involve negative events or traumatic events that kind of have defined them in some way. And the thing that I took out of this book that was the most powerful was he gives examples of people who've gone through horrendous situations, right? Parents who lost a young child to cancer, people who survived neglect or abuse in childhood, people who went through a divorce when they really didn't see it coming, people who lost their jobs or went through financial ruin. And still, no matter what the event, they even talk about Viktor Frankl, and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor, a psychiatrist, and his wife was killed in a concentration camp, and he survived 3 years in a concentration camp and went on to write the book Man's Search for Meaning. So basically, the idea is that no matter how bad things are, we do have the power to change our view about them, to take something away from it that makes us better and stronger and more beautiful on the other side of that event, no matter what it is. And I think this is extremely powerful in terms of being able to diffuse past events, not just in the, I've done a lot of work with trauma survivors. So there's a type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, where essentially in a safe space, you talk about the event over and over. And so there's the process of exposure, which helps with any anxiety disorder, just by repeating something, by stopping avoiding something, by facing your fears, they become less over time. But this is different. This is revisiting a past experience that may be tense, stressful, a negative memory, traumatic memory, and really reframing it, not just to diffuse it, but to rewrite it and to make it something that's part of your story. And it's a story of power and a story of success, because that thing that happened is part of what got you to where you are. And that's really, really powerful. So you might be a little skeptical about this. You might be saying, okay, yeah, it's all about just like glass half full versus glass half empty. I've heard this before. How is that really useful? Well, I think this book is really about how you can practice, how every one of us can practice seeing the glass as half full, and how that can help us to be more effective and more empowered and more energized to pursue the things that are important to us. And it's not the same thing as someone telling you, well, everything happens for a reason. That's really a passive idea, right? The idea that things are destined, or that things will turn out okay because fate has our back. That's not the idea here. The idea here is it's self-empowering. It's really saying that no matter what events happen in your life, if we know what our personal goals are and where we're headed, then we can take something positive from any experience that helps us get there faster, better, or stronger. And even just time passing means we're closer to our goals. So how can this help us? I think even if you've spent your entire life now, you're realizing that you're in the gap and you've always been in the gap. And it sounds strange, the idea of trying to be in the gain. And that's normal. Dan Sullivan talks about the fact that I think for most of us, the default is to focus on the gap. And we kind of share a lot of camaraderie and war stories with each other being in the gap. It can feel comfortable to be in the gap, but we can teach ourselves and learn to focus on the gain. We can get better and better at it. And it really is a much more powerful and happy place to be. And he emphasizes that if you're not in the gain, you're in the gap. So there's really no like halfway in the gain. You can't kind of fake it. You have to really embrace this idea that any experience is a positive experience, because you know where you're going and nothing's going to stop you. So I had a lot of thoughts as I was listening to this book about the difficulty that my kids will have in employing this mindset because of their exposure. I feel like it's inevitable exposure, even though they're still pretty young, to social media. And I feel very thankful that as a Gen Xer, I was able to form my sense of self without social media, because I do think that that really presents a lot of opportunities for gap thinking and gap comparisons. And it makes it that much harder to build this gain muscle that we're talking about. So again, they had this quote in the book, "Comparison is the thief of joy" by Teddy Roosevelt, which I think is so true. It's so easy to look at other people and what they've achieved or what they're doing and feel like, oh, well, he or she is already there. Why should I even bother? Because you always feel like someone else is farther ahead than you are in whatever you're trying to achieve. And that's true. That's always going to be true. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be measuring your own progress and setting your own goals. And when we compare ourselves to others, it's automatically putting us in that gap mindset because we see what others have, even if it's on social media, and we know intellectually that it's not the real truth or the full truth, even if it's a filtered version of reality. We, of course, are going to be thinking, why can't I have that? Or why can't I be like that? And negatively compare ourselves to others and be in the gap. So how do we help our kids combat this gap mindset that's so pervasive? I think we can have explicit conversations with them, no matter their age, about, knowing who they are and what they want for themselves. What are their goals for themselves? And only really focusing on that and not caring about what other people post about what they've done if that's not relevant to you and your goals. Or even what we want for them versus what they want for themselves. And this is a tough one. I think as parents, consciously or unconsciously, when we have a child, we project a lot of our wishes for what our life could have or would have been onto them. And we have ideas about what we want them to be. And as a child psychiatrist, I can tell you a lot of the conflicts and troubles that I saw in families were when a child, often in their teenage years, started to develop an identity that was in conflict with what their parent or parents wanted or expected them to be. And so we have to be aware that our children are their own individual spirits and souls and energies, and they have their own gifts to bring this world. And we have to really nourish that idea that they are the ones who have to decide what their fates are going to be, what their destiny is going to be, what their goals are going to be. And they should decide that for themselves, not to please us or to please anyone else, but because it pleases their own heart. And we should ask them to explore who they really are, what would bring them the most joy and satisfaction. And when our kids experience disappointment, which is inevitable, we can just note that they're filling in the gap, that they're disappointed, that they really wanted that. But at the same time, we can help them after they sulk and express themselves to notice how far they are from where they want to be, and yet how far they've come from where they started. And all of us can use a buddy when it comes to being able to elicit that memory. It can be really hard to think about how much progress you've made when you're feeling like you've fallen short of a goal. But as parents, we're in a prime position to help our kids to see how much progress they've made. You might see your kid really upset after they lose some sporting event and remind them how far they've come from when they first started the sport, or even earlier in the year. So then they talk in this book about 4 stages of skill building. And I think we all can be reminded of this. We can't be reminded enough about this for ourselves and for our kids, that anytime we're building a new skill or trying to get better at something, there are stages, and we go between these stages, not in a straight line. You kind of zigzag and eventually make your way there. So stage 1 is where our kids are in infancy, for example, with potty training. They're peeing and pooping in their diapers, and they don't even know that they're supposed to be doing anything different. They are unconscious about the fact that they are incompetent at a skill. And that's a pretty blissful stage because you're not really into stress about it. If you're the person who's unconsciously incompetent, it might be stressful for you as the parent, but the kid's fine. And then they go into stage 2, which is conscious incompetence. So now they know there's something that they could or should be doing, but they can't do it yet. And this is a very frustrating phase. And kids spend a lot of time in this phase for many developmental tasks between ages, 2 and 12 or so. And then stage 3 is conscious competence. So at this point, you can do it. So that's good. It feels better than stage 2. But you still have to be conscious about it. You don't do it without thought. It's not an automatic habit. You really have to think about the steps and practice and put a lot of effort in. So tweens and teenagers are in this phase, and this can be a very frustrating phase for us as parents because we may know that our kid can do something, and yet they're going to mess it up. And that's normal. So it's important for us to remember that when our kids forget something, like, they did the homework, but they left it on their desk and forgot to bring it to school, or I don't know what, you can probably think of a million examples where your kid isn't doing the thing that they know they should do, and we want to get upset with them. But I think it's important to pause and remember that this is just part of the mastery process. Conscious competence means that they have to make effort, and there's going to be a lot of things that they try during this phase, some of which are going to work well and some of which are not. But even those things that don't work well, they're a step that's necessary to get to the 4th stage, which is unconscious competence. So this is the point where everything is just kind of automatic. It's a habit. So for most of us as adults, get up, we take a shower, we get dressed, we brush our teeth, we go to work or whatever it is. We don't have to be thinking about that every step of the way. Like our 12-year-old might need our support to be able to get all those steps done. And this phase feels good because you don't even have to think about it. It does not take a lot of effort, and you're able to just do things. The trouble is that as we get older and we spend more and more time in stage 4, we can get very comfortable there. And trying new things means going back to stage 2. And that doesn't feel good, but it's so necessary if we want to grow. If we want to be on a constant path of improving ourselves, we have to get comfortable, and we have to encourage our kids to get comfortable with stage 2 and stage 3 and stage 4. It's stage 2 and 3 that are the uncomfortable phases, but we have to go through those. There's no shortcuts. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that these skill building stages never stop throughout our lives. And we have to remind our kids that, you can even talk to them about this explicitly, show them that slide. And you can talk to them about, like, well, you're in stage 3. So you tried this thing, it didn't work out. You learned something from it. Now you're going to get better. And it's part of the process of getting to stage 4. And I think this is really important because, again, as a child psychiatrist, I've seen a lot of teenagers who are hard on themselves. So if you have a kid who's pretty perfectionistic, driven, type A, really wants to achieve, they're going to have a really hard time with the inevitable setbacks and mistakes that are going to happen in stage 3 as they get towards stage 4. And as a parent, it's really important to be able to support your child and let them know that stage 3 is just part of the process. It doesn't mean that they're a failure or that they're not going to get to stage 4. It's just part of the steps on the way. So the final thing I wanted to share with you is an example that they gave from the book. And this is a young man named Trevor Lawrence. I am not a huge football fan or watcher, but we are in January and it's coming up on Super Bowl time. So many of you have probably heard of Trevor Lawrence. He is a quarterback and a very good quarterback. He is, I guess, creating some stirs in the sports community because of the way he talks about football. And this article, I put the link here, was on Sports Illustrated. And basically, he says things like, I want to do it because I want to be the best I can be. I want to maximize my potential. Who wouldn't want to? You're kind of a waste if you don't. So he talks very much still like a kid. He is a kid. He's only 21. But he says, it's hard to explain that because I want people to know that I'm passionate about what I do and it's really important to me, but I don't have this huge chip on my shoulder that everyone's out to get me and I'm trying to prove everybody wrong. In other words, he wants it and he's giving it his all, but if it doesn't go his way, he's not upset. He can live his life happily without football. He could take it or leave it, even though it's something that he's working really hard towards. And I think this is really beautiful and really healthy, because if we can give something our all, but at the same time know that that's not who we are, I think this kind of ties into the idea that we talked about in Untethered Soul. He's really seated in his conscious awareness. He's secure about his knowledge of who he is as a person. And although he loves football, he is not football. And his identity is not tied to his performance in the game. Even though he's going to do the best he can, he wants to reach his full potential. Who wouldn't want to? He doesn't want to waste that because he has a natural gift. At the same time, he knows that that's not all of who he is. And I thought that's really beautiful. And it kind of ties together the ideas of these two books that I've presented to you. So my goal is to be more like Trevor Lawrence. So they say, just as he loves football but doesn't need it, he loves winning but doesn't need it. This is a hard thing to prove. In high school and college, he rarely lost, and maybe once he tastes defeat more often, it will change him. But he's always gotten over losses quickly. He remained approachable. He talked to his teammates. He didn't stew. Lawrence says when his college career ended in January with a blowout loss to Ohio State in the college football playoff semifinals, I knew I did all I could do. It would be dumb for me in that moment to think I could have done something different. And I just think we could take a lot from this young man. I think we all can think of our own examples in our lives where maybe we blew up about setbacks that really weren't a big deal, or people we see at work who get really upset about things that aren't a big deal. We all could be a bit more calm, knowing that we're doing what we're meant to be doing, we're making progress, and even the outcomes along the way that aren't what we wanted are not the end of the world. So how to build your gain viewing muscles, your living in the gain muscles. They recommend in this book writing in a journal, in the notes app on your phone, wherever. Writing is a really powerful tool to solidify learning. It's better than talking, but if you're not a writer, that's okay. You don't have to, but think about it and talk about it. Think about, where are you now in relation to some goal you've set for yourself? What were your wins in the last 90 days? What are your goals for the next 90 days? Where will you be in 12 months? And where will you be in 5 years? And Dr. Hardy talks in the book about using this tool in his own journal writing and how he finds it really helpful to kind of go back and see 3 months before, what were the goals he had for these 3 months? What has he actually accomplished? And how do his goals change? How quickly does he achieve them? And of course, none of us can really know where we're going to be in 12 months, 5 years, or even tomorrow. But it's helpful to think about these things and to see how our goals change, and to be aware of how unexpected circumstances can enter your life and make outcomes better for you. So I think that's a nice exercise. All right, that's it, guys. That's it for my long rambling view of the gap and the gain. Please come back next week where I'm going to talk about Mo Gaudat's book, Solve for Happy. Take care.